Hello and welcome to the Japan Archives, a podcast where we'll be delving into the histories and mythologies from Japan's long history. I'm your host, Thomas.
And I'm your co-host, Heather. We'll also be reading a poem for you every week and giving a little history about the poet who wrote it. Ikimashou!
Okay, hello everyone and welcome back to the Japan Archives, episode 28 now. And we're going to call this episode The Shark Man. It's a story that Heather already does know. We did attempt to record this before the new year, but our microphones were messing up.
Our audio was eaten.
The program we were using online to record it just stopped. It only recorded my half and not, 2 minutes of yours, Heather? And then it just gave in.
I think 2 minutes of not even the actual program.
Yeah, it was just the beginning 2 minutes of us just talking randomly before we did our actual episode. But anyway, we finally got around to do it. But I think it worked out well in the end because we got to do our Christmas live episode instead. So yeah, I think it was okay in the end. So yes, today we are back and we want to do this episode for you again. So we want to tell you the story of the Shark Man. So to set the scene, again, we're going to be finding ourselves in one of the places we seem to be quickly growing a fondness for on this podcast, I think. And we're going to be in the area around Lake Biwa, outside of Kyoto once again. It seems that a lot of stories I've been finding recently seem to be located around here, and me and Heather have talked about it a bit, and we are starting to think that it's probably because Kyoto was the capital of Japan for the longest of time, so it makes sense that so many legends and yokai and stories just are located here as opposed to modern day Tokyo or even up in northern Japan, which until even the modern days was still quite desolate and abandoned and not much really happened there, I don't think. But now that I've said that, I'll probably find a story which proves me wrong. But anyway.
We're learning all the time.
We definitely are indeed. But as per tradition, how are you doing this week, Heather? It's actually quite nice, I think. We're actually recording on a day we don't usually get a chance to. You're normally quite busy.
Yeah, so this is unexpected. The unfortunate thing is I'm going to talk about the weather.
Unexpectedly unexpected. Okay.
Unexpectedly unexpected. And I'm going to talk about the weather because I like talking about the weather, to be honest. And it's just cloudy and gray and it was rainy yesterday. But I'm doing good. There's flu going around. There's a new flu or coronavirus. I don't think it's flu, it's coronavirus, which I think is flu part of coronavirus, I think is one of those. But that's please take care. Please take care. That's me. I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm doing okay. Yeah. I mean, school is winding down now. We still have a month and a half left to go, but almost finished all our textbooks. The kids are ready to take their final exams and leave for the spring vacation. We have started having a bit of snow.
What?
We had a bit of snow for an hour or so. Have you not had any yet? Well, I don't know. Do you get snow that far south? Probably not.
Actually, Hiroshima is pretty on the same level as Chiba. It's only maybe teensy bit more south, but it's still along the same kind of line.
Okay.
But where we are, not so much. But then again, Chiba wasn't supposed to get that much either before I moved there. But no, it's been during the days. It's much warmer than snow can fall. The night, if it's been at night, I've been asleep and I haven't seen.
Okay, fair enough. So, without much further ado, let's dive into the story. I mean, it's been a few weeks, and like I said, I've already told you the story once before, but there's a few extra bits I went into with this story for us, so there will be a few new bits for you at least.
Oh, good.
So yes,
I appreciate that you said we're going to dive into the story of the Shark Man. Thank you.
I didn't even realize I said that. So yes, let's do that. So we can find this story mentioned in several different textbooks, at least nowadays we can. But I suppose the most famous would be that this story came from a collection of short stories. And this story in question was known by the name of The Gratitude of the Samebito. And this was a short story written by a man called Lafcadio Hearn, who you might have heard of, I'm not sure.
I haven't heard of him.
So, very quick aside for this man. So, Lafcadio Hearn is a very interesting man in his own right, and obviously, we will have to give him his own episode. But in short, he is one of the Westerners who, at the time when Japan was still like this exotic and unknown place, he was someone who brought many of the stories of the country back to the West so people could learn about the country of Japan. And because of him, we have a lot of these old folk tales and fairy tales that up until this point hadn't actually been published anywhere else. So very grateful to him for bringing these stories to not only the West back then when everything was quite a mystery, but also bringing it back so we could still know of them from, well, to this day. But even though he was a Westerner, he did end up marrying a Japanese lady. He even took a Japanese name, but I'll leave that for the time we do the episode on him. But yeah, he eventually did die in Japan, and he's actually buried, I found out, in Tokyo, in Zoshigaya Cemetery. If you don't know where the cemetery is, it's a mere 12-minute walk from Ikebukuro Station.
Okay.
So I think I will definitely be paying a visit there in the near future, I think, just to pay homage to this man. Obviously, today is not about him. It's about one of his stories, The Gratitude of the Samebito. Now, the Samebito, to start with, is a very strange creature. We suppose could class him as a type of yokai. After all, yokai is the encompassing word for supernatural creatures as a general collective and whole in Japan. There are like smaller subsections, like you have the oni, which can be broken down into other things. You have the tengu, which can be broken down. But generally speaking, yokai is the overall term for the things that go bump in the night. So if you're wanting to know what the Samebito looks like, so you can get the picture in your mind for the story, you need to start thinking of a creature that in general has the body of a man, but has skin which is pitch black in color. You need to imagine that his eyes glow like emeralds, and that he has a very long beard, which looks like the beard of a dragon. Now that's all the tale goes into in regards to his appearance. However, considering his name is Samebito, which has been translated in English as the Shark Man, I kind of assume that there's more elements to his appearance that probably weren't mentioned in the original stories or something, which make him look more like a shark. But that's purely up to your own imagination. You can stick with the appearance I've told you, or you can add extra elements of a shark if you wish to do so. So Heather, do you have the picture in your mind ready?
I absolutely do, and he has a magnificent mouthful of teeth.
Ooh, okay. So getting into the story itself, it said that there was a man once known as Totaro. Not Totoro from the Ghibli films. I just want to say that now, so apologies if I'm accidentally mispronouncing the name during this. So yes, Totaro, not Totoro. So this man, he has made his way to the bridge, the Seta no Karashi Bridge, which is the same bridge we've mentioned before in episode 6, where Fujiwara Hidesato met the Dragon King when he was disguised as a dragon. And it was upon this bridge that Totaro came across the Samebito. Now Totaro, not to say the least, was a little bit startled at seeing such a strange creature in his way, but he made no move to attack him and instead started asking him several questions, including who the creature was. And so the Samebito turned to Totaro and said, "I am the Samebito. I was once in the service of the 8 Dragon Kings, acting as one of their subordinates. However, I have now found myself being dismissed from my work for such a very minor fault, and I even find myself banished from the sea. And so now I find myself completely miserable and without home or shelter. I can't even find myself food. If you would take pity on me, If you would find it in your heart to give me shelter and food, then I would be extremely grateful." And Totaro, having a kind heart, he did so. He gave the Samebito shelter, finding a home for him in the pond which resided in his own garden. And he also ensured that the creature was fed and watered for the entire time that he began to live with him. And so that is how it remained for the next 6 months. The creature once more had a home and was content with his life. Now, after all this time had passed, there came a day when there was supposed to be a large pilgrimage of women in the area, all of them making pilgrimage to a local temple. And I am sure Heather can guess which temple that is.
Midera?
Midera, of course. And it said that Totoro attended this festival at Midera, and during the events of the day, his eyes eventually fell upon an extremely charming woman. Now, Totoro is said to have recited the following about this girl. "Her face was fair and pure as snow, and the loveliness of her lips assured the beholder that their very utterance would sound as sweet as the voice of a nightingale singing upon a plum tree." And so with those words spoken, Totoro found himself having fallen in love with this girl. Her name, he later found out, was Tamana, and that the only way that he could have her hand in marriage was to give her the present in the form of a gift of 10,000 jewels, a completely impossible task for Totoro to achieve. Now, Totoro worried so much over this exorbitant amount of jewels that he had to give that he eventually made himself quite ill. And even the doctors who came to him to try and help could find no way to cure him, for they said that sickness relating to love had no remedy. And so at this time, the Samebito finally learnt of Totaro's illness. And so he approached the bedchambers of the man who had given him the gift of shelter for all these months. So Totoro never mentioned what was ailing him at the time, merely stating to his friend the Samebito that he did not know who would care or feed for his friend after he had finally died and passed on to the other world. And so then it finally dawned on the Samebito that Totaro was dying, and so the poor creature began to cry. And his tears are said to have been tears of blood. These tears, upon falling upon the ground, turned into rubies, and Totoro, seeing these jewels, immediately found his will to live returning to him, seeing now a way to gain the hand of the woman that he loved. He cried in elation, telling the Samebito that his tears would bring him complete happiness. His tears would be enough to repay him for the food and shelter that he had been providing for him for all these months. Now the shark man immediately stopped crying. He was confused after all, asking Totoro to explain what he meant, and so Totoro told him of his dilemma with the woman that he wished to wed. He informed him how he would never be able to reach the goal of 10,000 jewels for her dowry, but with the help of the Samebito and his ruby tears, he could finally achieve this goal. Totoro, then looking down to the floor, exclaimed that there were simply not enough jewels yet. He needed more, so much more, and so he asked the Samebito to start crying once more. Now the creature was rightfully hurt by what his friend had said to him, exclaiming that he had cried because he was genuinely concerned and worried for the well-being of his friend. "I cannot simply weep on demand," he exclaimed. "You are well again, my friend. Surely now has come the time for celebration." "But," Totoro interjected, "without your tears I will never be able to marry the woman that I love." Now Samebito, fortunately, was a kindly creature, and so he thought of a way in which he could get the rest of the jewels that his friend required. "Let us go down to the bridge over the lake tomorrow," he said. "Let us take with us a good supply of wine and fish. Perhaps as I sit upon the bridge I will think back to the home I lost and grow sad. Perhaps then I will be able to cry." And so when the next day dawned, they made their way to the bridge, and the Samebito, as he believed he would, grew sad looking over the water that had once been his home. His tears began to fall, turning to rubies as they landed on the Seta bridge. Now Totoro, and here I'm going to say in my personal opinion, I think he's about to show his true colors and his lack of care for this creature. It said that Totoro immediately began to grab at the jewels from the floor, continuing to do so until he had a total of 10,000. Not once during this did he show any concern for the creature who he had saved all those months ago. Now the Samebito was very fortunate for the kind act he had done. It seemed to have moved the Dragon King who dwelt at the bottom of the Lake Biwa, and both Totoro and the Samebito suddenly heard sweet music as they watched a great palace rise from the waters of the lake. The Samebito grew instantly joyous, exclaiming that the Dragon Kings were calling to him once more and that it was his time to leave. And with those final words, he leapt from the bridge and returned back to his home within the lake. Totoro then wasted no time after this, and presenting the jewels to the woman and her family, they quickly became married soon afterwards. Owari.
Ah, poor Samebito. But then again, he got to return home, but still, this is the second time I've heard this story, and I'm still like the selfishness of Totaro, and to not show any concern for his friend, and to ask such a huge sacrifice of him.
Exactly, it's such a weird relationship they have. Like, they try and make Totaro seem like he's this kind and loving man. After all, he did give the creature home and board and didn't ask anything of him, but as soon as he needed something that only this creature could provide for him, he suddenly stopped caring about him and was like, oh, now you can do this for me and repay me for all the care I have given you. But at no point until this had he even mentioned the fact that he expected payment for his kindness. So it's almost like a complete 180 for the character of Totaro. So either the character in the story wasn't that well developed, or it was a way to show, well, in my opinion, his true nature.
The whole becoming so despondent that you can't get married because someone wants a quite ridiculous demand to get married. It reminds, honestly, I'm gonna geek out for a moment and just say it reminds me of like in Star Wars, where like Padme lost the will to live.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so just, she's lost the will to live. But that never made sense to me then. And like his despondency doesn't really make sense to me now. Sometimes we want things that are difficult to achieve, and sometimes, even like Samebito, he even said, hey, you're not dying now, aren't you happy? Let's celebrate, you're okay. Like, even he's like, yeah, you're not dying anymore, this is wonderful. Let's celebrate. But no, he was so focused.
But then Totaro didn't see it that way.
Yeah, so this story is like, I really like Samebito. I think I wish I knew more of his backstory, like what happened to him in the Dragon Kingdom, why he was kicked out. But I think he must be a pretty decent person.
I mean, from what we see of him, he seems like the reason he's been banished, he says, is a minor thing. So almost that he made a simple mistake and he was punished too harshly, perhaps. Because, throughout the story, we see that he is just desperate for a home. He doesn't ask for anything apart from just give me a roof over my head. And then he happily just stayed in the man's tiny pond for 6 months. And he went out of his way to try and provide for Totaro, even though he didn't have to. But he did a good deed that allowed him to return to the Dragon King, which again is interesting, I think, because did the Dragon King let him go back because he proved that he was willing to rise above the selfishness of Totaro, perhaps, and that he was still happy to provide for someone, even though, well, in a way, he was being used, I think. Well, no, he was.
I mean, the tears were like originally like blood. I mean, crying blood tears. I imagine it must have been painful.
I can only imagine.
And 10,000. 10,000 tears. Oh my gosh.
What, you'd have to cry for hours and hours. And the entire time that you're sad and weeping, your friend is paying you no mind. He's just scooping up your tears and putting them in a sack.
Keep crying, keep crying.
Which I suppose would make me even sadder to see the person next to me not caring at all.
That's true. I think I would probably end up crying more, so.
Yeah. So yes, there you have it. Once more, the story of the Samebito. I hope you enjoyed it just as much the second time round.
I am so glad that Samebito made it back home and actually turned out to be a happy ending story, in a way, really.
I'm happier for the Samebito than I am for Totaro. I care more that the Samebito got to return home than Totaro got to marry this woman that he met once and instantly fell in love with. But that's just my personal opinion of the story.
Well, Thomas, thank you so much for sharing that again and adding some extra details that I got to be surprised about.
You're very welcome. So, I suppose this moves us on to part 2. So, are we back into the realm of poetry, or do we have a proverb tongue twister? What do we got this week?
Oh, I am so excited. I am so excited. I have been like teasing you, but sort of teasing you for like the past, since last week. I didn't want to tell you about this poem because I need to read to you the title for a gathering sponsored by Hekidosai at Odani Castle, north of Lake Biwa. This week is a poem. However, I have been, thanks to you and your lovely Christmas present, I have been studying poetry more, like Japanese poetry, a little bit more in depth. I'm at the top of the iceberg, the very tip of the top of the iceberg. I've got so much more to go. And I'm going to briefly touch on some things that I have to do more research into, but I wanted to share some things that I've learned so far.
Okay. And I trust you. No doubt we'll come back to it when you know more.
Absolutely, I hope so, because I found a different style of poem that I really love. But first, I'm going to tell you about the poet. This is Soboku Tani, and he was a bard during the Sengoku period, and he was from Fukui Prefecture. So I had to get the professor to help me with this poet, or excuse me, this bard, because he's not one of the more well-known, so I had to get the search done in Japanese, and I did require assistance for this, so I only have a little bit about him, but I think there's only a little bit known about him. Starting with the year of his birth. The year of his birth is probably unknown, but we have his death, which is 1545, and it's said that he may have been around 80 years old, but it's unverified. He was a master of renga, and renga is a form of waka, and it seems to be a communal poem made with each person doing the 575 syllables to make a larger poem.
Okay.
So it looks like he wrote the Yajima Kobayashi and Hyakuin, the Kochiku, and also wrote about religious works from others, perhaps from authors named Sogi and Socho. And I got this from a Japanese website, and so I had to use translation to actually read what it said. So I do have the information where I pulled that from, and I'll put that in the notes for you. Now, this poem I'm going to read for you is an example of ari no mama, or like things as they are. And these are poems that are simply descriptive, perhaps containing no elaborate imagery or deep symbolism. And personally, I love this type of poem. I like to just have a description of something, and there's nothing particularly deep. It's just something to enjoy and to let the visual wash over you. So I'm probably going to revisit this topic quite frequently.
Okay.
With that being said, is it okay for me to read the poem?
I have my pen. I have my paper. I'm ready.
Okay です。庭柳、お花が上に、浮きつしま。I'm gonna read it one more time. 庭柳、お花が上に、浮きつしま。
Now, I think I heard the whole of the first and last line, but I think I only understand what two of the specific words mean. So I think I heard niwa.
Yes.
But going on last week's tongue twister, it could have many meanings. So I'm going to go with yard in this context.
You're kind of close. You actually, I think the first time you described niwa to me, you said garden.
Oh, garden. Okay.
In this instance, it looks like it's probably referring to garden, but it could be yard, perhaps, in the grounds, in the yard, in the garden, depending on what your definition of niwa is.
And then I think in the last one, I'm pretty sure I heard shima, which, if that is the whole word and not just part of the word, I'm assuming it means island.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, so the translation is, in the garden, there are waves, and above the miscanthus, there's an island offshore.
A miscanthus bud.
Yes, miscanthus.
We've grown to hate those.
I like the miscanthus. No, don't hate the miscanthus. They're beautiful and inspirational.
No, I like them. My mum used to have one in the garden. I'm assuming in this... So what is the word for wave in this context? Yana?
Nami.
Oh, ya is a particle.
Particle, not preposition.
Ya. Nami. Ah, okay.
Hopefully we'll remember that next time. Particle, particle, particle.
Okay. So yeah, like you said, it's quite a simple poem. But I've kind of been listening to this audio thing, like when I go to sleep, and he has a way of describing stuff. He's like saying it's a story about the mundane, which can seem boring at times, but for a lot of people, that's just how life is. And actually, you can find a lot of beauty in the mundane and the plain and the simple. So I think it is a good context to symbolize that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there can be a lot of beauty in the mundane and the simple. And not just that, but really taking the time to just enjoy some of the simpler things. That cup of tea, that view of your yard, the picture you took on a holiday, just something to help you just simply be and breathe and relax. You can go back, to doing whatever you were doing, running around, doing lots of things, but sometimes just taking that moment to appreciate the beauty in the simple things.
I agree with you 100%. Once more, thank you, Hella. But yeah, obviously my story's over for the day. Your poem is over. Have you thought of anything else for the story at hand, or are we ready to sign off for today?
Nope, that's all for me. Thank you so much for the story. I really enjoyed it.
No worries, and I'm glad it was still as enjoyable the second time around. I was worried I would have to scrap it and would find a new story, but yeah, I think it worked out well. I still enjoyed telling the story again and talking a bit more about our opinions on it. I know the first time around, sometimes we were a bit like, we need time to think about how we really feel about it. So it was kind of nice that we've done this for the second time. So I think it worked out well. So yeah, everyone who's tuned in today, thank you for taking the time to listen, and we appreciate it. As ever, I will quickly do the little thing of, if you are enjoying the Japan Archives, please consider giving us a rating and review on wherever you listen to your podcasts. We would love to try and grow our show to 100 people. We would love to achieve that before our first year anniversary, and giving us a rating and review will definitely help with that. So with that out the way, thanks again for tuning in. We'll talk to you next week. Matane.
Matane.
If you've enjoyed the Japan Archives, please consider checking out historyofjapan.co.uk, a database we are making on Japanese history. You can also find the show notes for all our episodes here. If you're on Instagram, you can follow my account over at nexus_travels. That's NEXUS_travels.
We also have a Facebook and Twitter page, which you can find at Japan Archives. If you're interested in little slices of life in Japan, be sure to check out my website over at heatheroveryonder.com. Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes, have anything you'd love to hear about, head on over to historyofjapan.co.uk and send us a message.
If you enjoyed the show, please be sure to give us a rating and review over on iTunes. Thank you again for listening, guys. Until next time, bye.
Matane!